Hello everybody, Maven here, and there is a reason why I have never made a build around the Moth Keeper's wraps on this channel. There was just never anything to do with this exotic. They were, for lack of a better term, mid. You could either use them on Strand to get triple grenade charges, you can use them on Arc to synergize with the subclass, you could use them along with the Diris grenade launcher for Moth synergies, but still, no matter what you did, it was mid. But regardless, I decided to take one last crack at building around the Moth Keeper's wraps, and I think I finally discovered what they were meant for all along. And I think Bungie even knew about this, and they were just waiting for the community to figure out what to pair with the Moth Keeper's wraps, and I think this is finally it. So you want to pair it along with the Vexcaliber Exotic Glaive, and trust me, it'll all make sense once I break down the build. So let's get to it, and remember, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to hit the like button, it helps out a ton. So let's break it down. Hope you enjoy. So let's start off by breaking down what the Moth Keeper wraps do. So it gives you an additional grenade charge, and your grenades become moth grenades. Basically, it splits your grenade into two moths. One is Arc, one is Void. The Arc one will seek an enemy and explode for actually pretty decent damage and cause blinding. So yes, it will stun unstoppable champions, which is great. And the Void one will seek you or an ally to provide half a Void overshield. Now, why is this perfect for the Vexcaliber? Well, the Vexcaliber has a perk that gives you bonus glaive melee damage as long as you have a Void Overshield. And it has another perk that can give you some Void Overshield when you block with it, and kills will refresh the Overshield, but also remember that your Void Moth gives you an Overshield. Not only that, but here's another explanation of what's good about the Moth wraps. So say I'm meleeing a major with my Vex and I have an overshield. Well, tougher targets in the game tend to be more dangerous up close and tend to have stomp animation. Now yes, you can sometimes block it, but sometimes situations may be a little hectic. You get stomped, you lose your overshield, your Vexcaliber becomes weaker because it loses the perk. But now it's okay, because the Arc Moths blind them. So you get the Void Overshield to activate your Vex perk, you blind the target so you can glaive them for free without them stomping away your overshield. It's a match made in heaven. It's like these exotics were meant for each other. Has anyone figured this out yet? Or has it just taken us this long? So now you know. So is the video over now? Not really. While we're here, we might as well just do some testing to find out if the build is decent. So the next question is, are the moths good? So testing the damage against Carl, the moths deal 29k apiece, chunking Carl for half a bar of his health, so about a sixth basically. Also keep in mind, once again, it blinds. Now comparing that against the Vortex Grenade, which is the nade that you would use all the time when you play on Void, and it does very slightly more than a sixth of his health, so just barely beating out the moths, albeit the damage comes out a bit slower. However, this is not always the case. Carl is a mini-boss. Yes, it was proven that he's not a major, he's a mini-boss. The grenade damage differs against trash mobs quite drastically. So let's go to a Master Lost sector and start off with the Vortex Grenade against the Shadow Legion Cabal, which are pretty tanky enemies, and as you can see, it just barely picks up the kill right as the nade runs out. Now onto the moths, and good thing they kind of spread themselves out so we can see the damage. Each moth does about 60% of their health, so we can overkill this trash mob quite a bit more than the Vortex Nade can. Now let's try it in a Grandmaster Nightfall. So starting off with a Vortex Grenade against a single red bar, it doesn't suck hard enough and I don't manage to pick up a kill. Now against a big pile of trash mobs, it's rough, but I do barely manage to pick up one single kill with the Vortex Grenade, and honestly I was expecting more. Now onto the moths against one trash mob, it's no problem. We don't have to worry about missing our nade or the sucking power of it. We destroy that GM Acolyte with no chance of missing. And against a group of trash mobs, you can see the absolute massive radius of these moths. We managed to take out a handful of adds, plus we blind whatever survives, and the moth nade charges quicker, and we have 2 charges. Although I will say the Vortex Grenade can take advantage of things like Echo of Remnants as well as Echo of Undermining, which is pretty big, I'll admit. The moths unfortunately cannot proc Undermining because it is an Arc Grenade, and this states Void Grenade specifically. Even the Void moths count as Arc Grenades and will not weaken. However, it will still proc Echo of Instability to give us volatile rounds, which we can proc very easily, as you can tell by the power of the moths. But the other upside of the moths is that they track like a mofo. Let me show you a clip of their tracking. I started by throwing it literally around a wall from Carl, like 17-ish meters away. No problem, the moth will go around obstacles to find its target. Nowhere is safe. So next up, I tossed it across the room like 30 to 40 meters away. And again, no problem. Once these moths smell blood, they will seek and destroy. Nowhere is safe. When there's a moth, there's a way. So on to the final throw, I decided to Hail Mary it across the world. I absolutely yeeted this thing, and you guessed it, here they come. Unfortunately, from that range, it seemed to be programmed to recognize me from any extreme distance, so it gave me 2 void moths, but still, if you're missing your nade throw by 100 meters, you should probably go to the doctors and get that checked out. So don't worry, when you're using these moths, you can trust that they will hit something. So now I'm gonna play another clip of gameplay, and I want you to pay attention to how often we can toss a moth nade. This build is capable of throwing a nade every few seconds consistently, even though the Vexcaliber doesn't have Demolitionist. So first off, we have Echo of Starvation to give us Devour when we pick up an Orb of Power, and obviously that's great for surviving, but more importantly, Kills while Devour is active will grant you a bit of grenade energy. Next, we have Echo of Exchange so that melee kills grant us grenade energy, and yes, that does work with your glaive melee, as you can see by the gameplay. It's giving us pretty big chunks of grenade energy as if we had Demolitionist. Next, we are running Grenade Kickstart to refund an amount of grenade energy based on the number of armor charge stacks we consume as we throw our nade. And that's why we're running Charged Up on our chest, so we can hold up to 4 stacks of armor charge, and then we also have stacks on stacks on our boots to fill up the armor charge quicker. And we can make the orbs we need via things like Harmonic Siphon, we have Firepower, and we have Reaper. And we can scoop up these orbs easier with Powerful Attraction. But these orbs do serve another purpose by proccing Innervation and Absolution on our boots to give us a bunch of ability energy back, but I wouldn't argue with you if you decided to run Void Scavenger and place in one of these mods instead. After all, we are running Harmonic Reserves in the chest for our glaive, as well as our heavy weapon. So we want to dodge as much as possible for Powerful Attraction and Reaper, but also for Bomber. That gives us some grenade energy back when we dodge. Now technically we do have an additional means of nade energy in Impact Induction, but I only really use my Smoke Bomb against bosses to weaken them, and I don't use it that much in general because it's annoying that you gotta swap off your glaive to use it. That's why I'm using the Marksman's Dodge instead of Gambler's Dodge, but to each their own. And since we're here, I might as well explain the rest of the mods. We just got some finders on the helmet, but you can really run whatever you want. And then on the chest, you can just use whatever resist mod that pertains to the threat modifier. Now you may see me going invis quite often, and that's because of our Aspect Stylish Executioner that makes you invis when you defeat a void debuff target, and that's going to be volatile in this instance. We pretty much have endless volatile rounds because of our crazy amount of mod spam, constantly proccing Echo of Instability. Now for the final fragment slot I haven't explained yet, I'm using Echo of Obscurity to make me invis on finishers, but you can pretty much run whatever you want in this slot. I wouldn't argue with you if you use something like Persistence or Leeching. It depends on the type of content. Stat-wise, I would recommend double hundreds in Resilience and Discipline, and always make sure that you got a minimum of 3 Intellect and invest the rest into Mobility. For my other weapons, I have the Buzzard with Overflow and Kinetic Tremors, partly because of Anti-Barrier. I don't pull it out much because I have the Glaive out most of the time, but it's pretty much guaranteed to be overflowed by the time that I do. And as for my heavy weapon, I would recommend the Regnant to give you a DPS option while taking advantage of your Harmonic Reserves. As I mentioned in a recent video, you can't have a build only based around ad clear. You always gotta make sure that you have some kind of DPS option on you. Now I will say this, while this video is solely based around the combo of Vexcaliber and Moth Keeper's wraps, this whole Void Devour setup with instability can also be great with other weapon choices as well. You don't specifically need the Vexcaliber. You can make this build work amazingly with any void weapons that have Demolitionist. Therefore, my other recommendation is going to be to have the Wither Horde as your exotic DPS option, and then have the Null Composure run double specials, and then have the Corrective Measure machine gun with Demolitionist and Adrenaline Junkie to basically act as your primary weapon. This works very well with the mods as well, and honestly may give the Gear Falcon's Hauberk a run for its money. I still get to keep my infinite volatile rounds, but now I also get these 2 awesome Moth Nade charges. It's a win-win. And remember, if you do decide to mess with the machine gun version, you can also mess with the fragments. And I don't know if I showed this in the background gameplay for this video or not, but I did use this build in the Grandmaster Heist Battlegrounds Moon, and I was using the corrective measure as my primary weapon basically, and it put in the work. I only really use my glaive against the tankier targets because you're basically a god when you're shielding with the glaive in front of anything in the game. You have like 1,000,000% damage resist. Plus the Vexcaliber hits pretty hard. It's no joke. It's the only shotgun spread glaive in the game, and it has a pretty fast rate of fire. And remember, glaive projectiles received a 25% damage buff this season. So I'll show a side-by-side comparison against Carl with the Vexcaliber versus the machine gun, the corrective measure, and you can see that the Vexcaliber holds up. It really does. Even with the manual reload, it was still pretty close. Seriously, don't sleep on rapid fire glaives right now. So that's gonna wrap up the build for today. Gameplay loop, there's not much to explain other than meleeing and nading whenever you get the chance, but just remember to get a glaive projectile kill after dodging though, because that will proc Reaper, and unfortunately the glaive melee will not, so keep that in mind. So as always, I'll leave a dim loadout link to this build down below in the description and the pinned comment if you would like to give it a try. And if you got any buddies who are hunter mains, I'd appreciate if you share the video with them. I'm sure they'd find it enjoyable. And if you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate if you drop a like and a comment, because interacting with the video in different types of ways really helps out the algorithm and goes a long way. So clicking on something really helps. And if you are new here, please consider subscribing. Would love to have you here. And with that, I'll catch you in the next video. See you later.